welcome to another episode of our recap and review series for Ahsoka Season 1, Chapter 5. We're 3PN. I'm Jake.
And I am Shane.
All right, we are going to review Chapter 5, which is titled Shadow Warrior. I think this is my favorite episode of the series. I need to admit something to you because I think I lied to you earlier. I think when Season 1 came out, I watched everything but the finale episode. And I know we talked about so I say episode 5 is my favorite, but I actually have not seen the last episode. I think I've seen like the first 5 minutes of it. So yeah. So we'll see. I'm gonna watch that. Obviously, I'm just gonna save it for the end when we go to actually review that one, and we'll see how it holds up. But this episode so far is my favorite episode. So I know I'm excited to jump in. You have anything you want to add before we just jump into the episode?
We've talked about the last episode. How have you not seen it?
So I just know things here and there, like you'll see like things on Facebook or whatever. So I know vaguely what happens, but I have not actually watched it all the way through. So I guess it remains to see if I actually like the episode or not. I guess we'll get to that when I watch it.
Apparently. Well, I know this episode is like a turning point to the series. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on here. This is, where we find like some direction. So far, everything has been building up to this episode, and I think it took a little long to get here, but we're here now, so it's about to really ramp up.
But I think honestly, just watching the episode over again, it's pretty incredible. Just not just where the story's at, but just what they do with visual effects and bringing two characters together. One that's obviously super iconic, Anakin, Darth Vader, and bringing them back into this episode. I think is really great. I watched Obi-Wan. Did you watch Obi-Wan? I assume so. Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was really great. Anytime they use,
Obi-Wan
a character.
Like that.
Yeah, no, it was great. I liked it. I know it got a lot of. That's another one that got a lot of negative reviews too, but I really liked that one. So I guess we'll just jump right in. We left off with Morgan Elsbeth, Balon, Shin, Sabine. They are in the Eye of Sion. They're jumping to hyperspace towards Thrawn, presumably, right? Yeah. After being struck down by Balon, Ahsoka wakes up into the world between worlds, and she wakes up. She sees. I actually think I had the subtitles on, and he says something like "Hey Snips" or something. It's her nickname he gave her, right? And she turns around, and Anakin's waiting there. Hera and her son Jason and the crew of the X-Wing fighters, they are arriving on Cetos. We assume they're looking for Ahsoka, Sabine, Huyang to give them some backup. And that's where we end Chapter 4. So Episode 5 is titled Shadow Warrior. We start with Hera landing her ship on the Night Sister Temple area. Her and her crew can't find anyone. Jason and Chop are trying to leave the ship. Hera tells them, come on, you can leave. And she hears something over by the edge of the cliff there behind one of those like monolith statue looking things. And she, pulls her blaster out and kind of creeps around there, and she sees a depressed Huyang holding he's holding the Mandalorian helmet that's Sabine's helmet. And he says, I told them to stick together, but they never listen. So, and that ends that scene right there. Yeah. Not much to that scene. Obviously kind of picks up right where we expected it to. Mm-hmm. Huyang already been searching for them. We discussed this last episode, or not really my gripes or anything, but, sticking together should have been the first thing they should have done.
Yeah,
Yu
it's a
Yang
common
told him
trope.
to do. Yeah, very very common trope. So anything to add to that beginning scene?
Yeah, no, not really. We already sort of we basically beat this horse last episode because
Yeah.
we alluded to this scene while we were talking about other stuff. It's just like you go back into anything else where you got a Star Wars duo. Bad stuff always happens when they split up.
Yeah.
Also, foreshadowing for whenever we do eventually start a D&D campaign. Bad things happen when you split up.
I'll keep that in mind. All right, the next scene is we are in the world between worlds. Anakin and Ahsoka are basically just discussing why she is there. She doesn't really remember at first. She kind of comes to, remembers that Balon she was in a fight with Balon. He struck her down, and Anakin tells her, "Well, she does remember, so you do have a chance." And she says, "You know what? Kind of what?" He says, "To live, right?" Um, and then tells her that he is there to finish her training. And Ahsoka then says to that it's a little late for that. Anakin then says, "One is never too old to learn, Snips." So I think it's kind of cool. And I do like that. I don't have Star Wars fans going to hate me, but I don't remember why he calls her Snips. Do you remember that? I know that's her nickname, but I don't remember why. If there's any like overarching meaning to that.
um, it's because she's snippy. She's got this snippy
I
little
believe that.
sassy attitude.
Yeah.
And because so in the first episode that you see, or that I think Obi-Wan brings Ahsoka to
Yep.
him, she's like real sassy towards him, and he's obviously like has not learned patience at all. Doesn't know how to
And
train
didn't
younglings,
want a
and
Padawan, right?
and so like through that whole first episode, she is just you know, giving him back talk and sass, and so he just starts calling her Snips, and it
Yeah.
becomes more of an endearing nickname, whereas at first it was kind of an insult, you know.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, Ahsoka finally relents and asks, what is the lesson? She's there to learn from Anakin. He says to live or die, and he draws his lightsaber, which you can recognize as blue at this point. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a younger Anakin, or at least a not Darth Vader Anakin, right? And
Yeah,
Ahsoka doesn't want to fight him. Anakin says, "I've heard that before," which is a really good callback to the fight between him and Luke. And a fight ensues.
it's also I don't mean to cut you off. It's
No, you're fine.
also a callback to when Ahsoka and Vader are fighting each other in Rebels. She says the same thing to
Oh,
him. I'm
that's
not going to fight you.
right. That's
Yeah.
right. So that's good. So that's the end of that scene. Anything else to add?
No, it's really good. It kind of so I know a lot of people's complaints throughout this series have been geared towards the way that they portray Ahsoka's personality and how
Yeah.
she isn't as like quirky and snippy and sassy as she like normally is or was portrayed in the animated series that she was a part of. And you get to see that come out of her a little bit, even in this initial exchange where she's got her arms crossed when she's talking to him and a little bit turned away, um, because that's how those two always interacted with each other, right?
Right.
They both took each other, especially once they got to know each other and figure out how to work together. They both took each other very seriously, but they also weren't going to just give it up to the other. They had to
Yeah.
play hard to get, just because that was kind of how their dynamic worked, and it was entertaining. Um, so you're
Well,
seeing
that was
that,
a very true like brother sister relationship
yeah,
that they developed. Still kind
mm-hmm.
of a little like competitive and
Yep,
confrontational, but
yep,
they truly loved each other, like in a sense of just brother and sister. They respected each other, not how Ezra and Sabine were portrayed. That now in this series they are apparently brother and sister. But whatever, that's another
yeah,
gripe to get.
yeah. I think we talked about that one in the first episode when we were doing some foreshadow talking. I'm still kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
upset uh, that's how they're portraying this because those
I know.
two, yeah,
Yeah.
stuff.
Back with Hera and Chopper and Jason, Hugh Yang. They find the broken map, discuss finding Ahsoka and Sabine. The X-Wing pilot approaches, telling Hera that they need to return. We find out that Leia Organa is the one covering for them back at wherever. I mean, with the what are they called? I'm gonna forget the name of them. Uh, Whatever, the new fleet, right?
Oh yeah,
What are we calling them?
the
I
New
don't know why. I
Republic.
want to. Yeah, I always want to call them the rebels, just because it just keeps going back and forth and back and
Yeah.
forth. So what? Yeah, thank you for that. I'm drawing a blank there. But anyway, so we know that Leia's involved in covering for them. Hera refuses to leave. Hera's arguing with the pilot a little bit while Jason is trying to get her attention. He's standing over by the edge of that cliff, trying to get her attention. Mom, kind of being an annoying little kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so she finally relents, goes over to Jason, and he tells her that there's something out there, and he can feel it looking at the ocean. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Jason tells his mom to listen to the waves, and tells her that don't you hear it? The lightsabers. And Hera, kind of not really taking them too seriously. She
Yeah.
listens, and then she can hear it.
Yeah.
So, and we can get into this later, but does that then insinuate that Hera is somehow force sensitive now too, or is that Jason like allowing her to hear that somehow?
So I think there's a couple of things going on here. First and foremost, I want to bring it back to the pilot because I think that interaction is just kind of a little bit funny and just kind of neat.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those situations that you'll have any normal day at work, especially with a boss that you trust and respect, but still think they're being stupid. He's just like, he's like, this is gonna come and bite us in the butt, but all right, whatever you say, you can
Yeah,
tell they're friends, you can tell they work well
yeah.
together, but you
You're the
also can tell
boss.
that, yeah, he doesn't agree with what she's trying to tell him to do, but
Yeah.
he's just gonna suck it up and do it anyways. But
It's not like either of us have ran into that on a daily basis at work.
yeah, I think both of us have been in Harris shoes because we're both kind of bosses in our respective fields. So it's like even when we got people that like us and they're like, "Really, this is what we're
Yeah.
doing today?" All
Yeah.
right, but so we fast forward to the cliff, and you had the question like, is Hera force sensitive? So I think this is just Disney sort of foot stomping that you don't have to have a high midichlorian content to utilize the force in small ways. Um, she obviously knows that her son is force sensitive. She hasn't outright stated that. I think she's keeping it under wraps, but she knows. So when like, first time he calls out to her, she's like, "Not now." And then he calls out to her again. She's like, "Oh, I think he's doing something. So let's go figure this out."
Right.
And so just like Sabine, who has no midichlorian content, but she's learning how to listen to and wield the force. So I think it's one of the things where anyone can do it if they try hard enough. And Hera's been exposed to force users for a long time at this point. I mean, she had a kid with one of them. So I think in that sense, it's not saying like, "Hey, Hera's going to become a Jedi now." Everyone's going to be a Jedi now. I think it's just their way of saying, "Hey, look, like she's learned a little bit just being around these people, so she's more open to it than like your average person would be." So I don't think
See, and
I don't.
I don't want to go off on like a long tangent on this, and I don't know what side of that I fall on either. I kind of go back and forth, but and maybe you feel differently. But how do you feel about Disney taking that and kind of almost retconning the original material of you have to have that high metachlorine count or whatever the hell it's called to be able to be force sensitive. It's kind of like anyone can do it now. Like I don't feel that that's the way to go. I don't know. It just kind of irritating a little bit.
Well, if Disney does it right, which so far I don't think they've flat out messed it up, it's okay. The midichlorian thing didn't come into play until the prequel trilogy. How it was explained in the
That's
original
true.
trilogy
Yeah.
is that the force is in all things. It binds and connects us. Meaning everybody, everyone has some connection to the Force, no matter who or what you are. Like every stone, tree, and sentient being all has a connection to the Force. Now, exploiting that
Right.
connection, utilizing that connection, that's what the Jedi and the Sith do. So, and then you have the prequel trilogy that explained it as these microscopic beings called midichlorians, and those are who are actually funneling the Force through everything, and people that have a higher midichlorian content have a stronger connection to the Force. A lot of people don't like that midichlorian explanation. I'm one of those people. I think it was a kind of a dumb way to explain it, and I think the original way to explain it was more mystical, but also made more sense. And I think that's
But
kind
doesn't
of
that take away from like what makes either a Jedi or a Sith, in lack of a better term, like special for this universe? Right? Because that basically is telling you if the midichlorian thing is not a thing anymore, if they're getting rid of that, and it's like a janitor on one of the starfighters can now be a Jedi if he tries hard enough and thinks hard enough.
well,
I think that I don't know. I don't know if I can get behind that.
it's supposed to take a lot of really intense training, right? So knowledge of the Force is part of it, and being exposed to it is part of it. So more often than not, if you're just some moisture farmer on Tatooine, you're never going to unlock those connections to the Force that's going to allow you to wield it and use it the way you want. Um,
Yeah.
it takes time, it takes training, it takes concentration. That's why the Jedi Council would essentially steal up younglings and keep them secluded for years before they even really taught them anything.
Yeah, but then
They
if you look at a guy like Jason here, who's a child who just has this natural ability, hasn't gone through any training, hasn't gone through any kind of force. So he doesn't have a master, right, to teach, and he's already like super, I guess, sensitive to he can hear the lightsaber battle with Ahsoka in the World Between Worlds. He has that kind of sensitivity to the force. So what is the explanation of that? Because you can't
he
have it both ways. You
well
can't. You
that I'm sorry. That's what makes some people special, right? Some people naturally have
yeah.
a stronger connection. He comes from like he comes from a I don't know like who his dad's not masters like parents were, but at least his father was very strong in the Force, and throughout Rebels becomes like even stronger than he was in the beginning. Like he becomes by by all means a master. You know, there was no council to like grant him a rank of master, but on skill level, he reached the point of being a master. So Jason's dad is someone who is very powerful in the Force. And I don't know if Force sensitivity is necessarily hereditary, but sure, maybe it can be. And
Well,
so
look at
that's
Anakin and Luke.
yeah. Well, they didn't. Well, Anakin didn't have a father, and there's theories on how that worked out. And yeah, Luke's dad is Anakin, the most powerful Jedi slash Sith to have supposedly
Well,
existed.
see, and I guess that's my point, though. So, in universe, if we're taking off of the material given to us, which is all we have to go off of, if Luke is that powerful, and because of Anakin being that powerful with the Force, that would then tell you, or you can insinuate from that whether it's metachlorine or some other kind of force, whatever they decide to go with it, but it's not just something you can learn. Like
No,
what I'm saying is like Sabine is never going to be as powerful as Anakin or Luke or even Ahsoka. If she tries hard enough and gives it her all, she's never going to be to that point. So that would then lead me to believe that it's something other than you can just think hard enough and you can use the force. It just doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't jive well with me. I guess. I just
well, I mean, if go back to the prequel trilogy, right? There were hundreds of thousands of Jedi.
right.
Most of them did not reach the rank of master. They were just acolytes, soldiers, knights, whatever rank. I don't know the exact rank structure of the Jedi Council, but like the vast majority of Force wielders don't ever become more powerful than just like your run of the mill Jedi. They're normal and average in respects to being a Jedi, and there are some who there are individuals that failed the training, right? And they end up still working for the council, but on much more menial tasks like being janitors or certain guards and stuff like that, or
Yeah.
record keepers. Um, so I think in this Disney universe, what we have is anyone has the ability through enough training and determination, right, to use a modicum of the Force, and become potentially like your average run of the mill Jedi, whereas
Right.
others are born with a stronger connection, and so they have a foot up in the game, but they still are required to do all of this intense training in order to really harness and reach their potential. So I think everybody has somewhat of a potential, but only a very select few have a high potential as far as wielding the force. So, and I think if we stay true to the original trilogy, that makes more sense. The prequel
Yeah.
trilogy is kind of like, ooh, you have like no midichlorians, so you got no shot. But with the original explanation, where the force is in everything, it makes sense that anyone can kind of learn to a degree. Now, some people like with Jason, in regards to Jason, how he's sort of like, ooh, I hear lightsabers in the ocean. I mean, he's been exposed to Jedi, not just because his dad was a Jedi, but like he knows Ahsoka.
Yeah.
He's read stories of Jedi. I'm sure his mom has like taught him as much as she can from a non-force user's perspective. So it's not like he's a moisture farmer on Tatooine who's never seen anything. This dude's going all over the galaxy, seen all sorts of stuff. So yeah, he's like going to be more naturally preordained, or I don't know what the right word to use is, but he's his abilities are going to manifest uh, more than like someone who's not going through all of this stuff. Plus,
Right.
the Force really works on emotions, and you can tell that he really cares about Ahsoka. So that emotional connection to her, maybe that's also helping him a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good point.
so I don't know.
All right.
I agree with it, but yeah, let's continue.
No, I hear you. All right, Hera tells her crew of the X-wings to gear up again. They're going to go do a low sweep of the ocean. When the pilot asks why, Hu Yang explains that Jason has abilities like his father, who's a Jedi. His name's Kanan Jarrus, so anybody who's seen Rebels knows who that is.
Yep.
I think it's really funny how the pilot's kind of all up in arms about another kind of funny exchange with this guy. He's all up in arms about kind of what are we doing? Like
Mm-hmm.
what's happening? And Hera walks away, and Hu Yang just says, okay, and her father's Jedi, he's force sensitive, he's
Yeah.
special. He's just like, okay, and turns around and goes, like, just okay,
Well,
just takes it.
he used to fly with Luke, right? He was
Right,
one of
right.
those original pilots who used to fly around with Luke, so he knows a lot about like how the Jedi work and like their methods and stuff. So he's like, all right,
Right.
Jedi stuff,
Just
cool.
kind of accepts it.
I'm just
Right.
gonna shut up in color and wait for the show to happen because he knows
Yeah,
like
right.
something's gonna happen. Yeah.
All right, the next scene is we're back in the world between worlds with Ahsoka and Anakin. They're still fighting. Ahsoka lands a blow on Anakin and tells him that it looks like you don't have much left to offer, kind of jabbing him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anakin smiles and says, I haven't taught you everything yet, and then shatters that sky bridge, whatever we're calling it,
Yeah.
and Ahsoka just falls. And I, maybe I was going to say this for the end, just as a question for you, though. Is this the first time we've seen, at least in the world between worlds, them kind of transition to a different place and time? I'm just confused on what the world between worlds is, right? Because we've seen it before, where what Ezra pulls her from another point in time back to the world between worlds, but we don't ever like transition within to something else, to a younger version of someone else. Is that new? Is that different than anything we've seen before?
I mean, yeah, it is different than what we've seen like on screen before, but I don't think they're really going back in time. This is like a force vision. Uh, I think this is a way for Anakin to train Ahsoka to have a stronger connection in the Force, and B, this is sort of like, how do I explain this? She's fighting to survive right now, like in a very literal sense. Her spirit is in the world between worlds because she's at a crossroads where she can just let go and die, or she can fight to hold on and actually live. So it's both like a training scenario, but it's also um, like the visual and physical representation of Ahsoka fighting for her life. Because I mean, and Anakin keeps saying it multiple times, like you can either
Yeah.
fight or you die. Right? That's what he's really saying. He's like, you fight to get back to your body, or you're done. Like your story's over. This is it.
But let
Um,
me ask you something. So, do you think that this is actually the world between worlds where she kind of fell into, or is this all taking place in her head, or is it sort of like a one and the same type
I
deal?
think I think her spirit. I don't think she's physically in the world between worlds like Ezra did. I think this is
Right.
just her spirit, because the world between worlds is where force spirits reside. So like
Right.
this is where Yoda's residing. It's where obviously Anakin is residing. Obi-Wan's in here. Qui-Gon's in here. This is where people who have gotten a strong enough connection to the Force and have gone through the proper training, that this is where they exist now. And so that's why Anakin's like, "Ooh, I didn't expect to see you here so soon." He, obviously didn't think that she was gonna just, up and get killed this early on. He obviously can see, I guess, somewhat into the future. It's kind of weird. It's not fully explained what all Force ghosts can do, and it's also not fully explained what all the world between worlds can do. So I think, in a
Okay.
sense, he kind of has a little bit of. And Anakin's always been able to see the future, anyways. But I think he's able to use this new Force Ghost version of himself to sort of see things from a big picture point of view. Uh, and so he's at this point he's trying to encourage her to keep fighting, not to die, because I think he knows that she's needed for something else.
Gotcha. All right. Well, anyway, so Ahsoka is falling. She emerges in this hazy, smoke-filled battle. She sees some clone troopers run past her. She's obviously a very much younger version of herself, which I think they did a great job kind of matching
Yeah,
actors. She looked
they
very similar. You can definitely tell that, or you could insinuate that that's a younger version of Rosario
yeah.
Dawson, right?
It's actually the same actress that plays young Gamora in Avengers.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, they do something really cool. Probably should wait to say this, but I'm not. So if you look at the young version of her here, and you look at the young version of her at the end, excuse me, at the end of this sort of training scenario, you can tell that she is like an older version of her younger self. So they even age the young
Gotcha.
actress, like the Leku changes
As
a
they
little
move
bit.
through. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't notice. I didn't notice it because I think there's like three different scenes where it's in the past. I
Yeah.
didn't notice it in the second scene, but in the final scene, which actually takes place after she separates from the Jedi
Yeah.
Order,
Yeah.
timeline wise, she looks like an older version of her young self. So it's really cool. I
Okay.
think it's something just really cool that Disney did that helps with
Yeah.
like continuity and stuff.
Yeah. All right. Ahsoka realizes that they are essentially reliving or semi quasi like in her head,
Hmm.
going through the motions anyway of the Clone Wars. This is the first one of the first missions that her and Anakin were on together. Um, they she's still trying to figure out why they're even there. Like, why is she even seeing this? Why are they reliving this? Or however you want to say that. she says to Anakin, I don't understand. And Anakin says, that's your problem. And just runs off into battle like it's, there's nothing different going on. This is what you're here for, right? So
Yeah.
Ahsoka chases after him, and as they run into battle, Ahsoka yells to him, "What about my training?" And Anakin kind of turns back and yells, "This is your training," right? And they run off into this battle, and we assume that the Clone Wars battle is ongoing, right? And that's what they're doing. We skip to after the battle. We don't get to see the actual battle, which is super disappointing, and it just makes me want a live action Clone Wars series
Yeah.
with these actors. I think it would be great. It would be hard to age down Anakin for a full series, I think, or Hayden Christensen, right? But
Yeah. He's
what
definitely
a
getting kind of old.
yeah, I think maybe they messed up here. They gave us too much of what people wanted, seeing this
Yeah, I
live
agree.
action Clone Wars, and now everyone's going to be okay. When is this coming? We're
Yeah.
all going to want this now. Which honestly, I think they could get away with it. I think they have a shorter season. Obviously, you don't stick to like a long season like the Clone Wars was,
Yeah.
but man, I think they totally could do this. I
Honestly,
do
a
think they would
little.
have to recast people, but
Yeah, and a little bit of makeup and some CGI, and they can make Hayden Christensen look younger,
you're
So
right.
it's
They probably
possible.
could.
He's
Yeah, they
not like
probably could.
old, old. He's just older
Yeah,
than like young adult Anakin, or yeah,
yeah.
Anakin at this point.
Listen, I'd watch it. So if they do it, I'm 100% on board with the Clone Wars live action series. So we skip to after the battle, Ahsoka standing amongst all these clones who are, badly injured. It's kind of after battle. Uh, I know everyone's kind of getting treated, whatever. They're gearing up to go somewhere
It's
else,
more it's more of a
presumably.
mid battle triage because they even say later on
Right.
like, hey, they're still
That's
going.
true. Yeah,
So it's
there's
not
still
even after
fighting
battle. Like
left.
yeah, they're fighting. They're just
Yeah.
taking a quick breather.
And Ahsoka's really taking it all in, and it's affecting her. You can tell very, very badly. She feels very guilty. Um, she tells Anakin. Anakin kind of sees her, right? She's actually sitting next to like this stormtrooper on like a gurney, right? And she's visibly upset, and Anakin sees her, kind of comes over to her. Ahsoka tells Anakin that she's at fault, that so many of these clones died. They followed her orders into battle, and Anakin kind of pulls her aside and tells her that this is war. This is what happens. As Jedi, it's their job to lead.
Mm-hmm.
And Ahsoka tells him that this isn't what she trained for. And Anakin tells her that they must adjust to the times, thus outlining the fall views of the Jedi Order at the time and the downfall of the Jedi Order during this time, right? They talk about how, or he actually tells Ahsoka, at the time when he was going through his training, Obi-Wan taught him that the Jedi are peacekeepers, but now they need to adjust, and he's teaching her to be a soldier. Um, Anakin kind of jokes around a little bit, and Ahsoka's not very pleased with him, kind of pissed off. How could you joke around at a time like this, right? Anakin tells her that in order to lead and survive, you're going to have to fight. Period. And Ahsoka says, "What if I want to stop fighting?" And we kind of see what the point of this training is. And Anakin just says, "Then you'll die." And Anakin just walks off back into battle, and Ahsoka staring at him. You see this flash, almost like a lightning flash, and you see Anakin for the first time really turn into Darth Vader, and then right back into Anakin, and it pans back over Ahsoka, and you can just see the horror in her eyes, knowing what he's going to become. And you kind of get the sense that Ahsoka is truly like living through this battle in the Clone
Yep.
Wars while still holding on to who Ahsoka is in the current time as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a weird mix of almost like that in between where she's both, and
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of see just the horror on her face of her realizing that what her master is going to become. Right?
I think that just the acting alone in this scene is very, very good.
Yeah,
especially for the kid that's playing young Ahsoka. Like
yeah,
she's really showing off her acting chops here. It's
yeah.
very well done, and I think this is kind of what Anakin was alluding to when Ahsoka said, "I don't understand." It's like that's your problem. She does have all of the memories of her adult self right now because she essentially is still her adult self. She is just manifested as a child to make sense in this vision, and she still, as this older, wiser, more powerful Jedi, is taking these deaths just as hard as she did when she was a kid.
Right.
She should and, and with all of her experiences and all of her training and everything that she's been through, she should be able to walk through this battlefield, not only realize that it's not real, but realize that this is the way that it has to be, or at least it's the way that it had to be back then. Like she had to
Or
learn how
did
to
it? I mean,
lead.
I get, is
Yeah,
that the overall point? Did it have to be like that? Like, you definitely get a sense of how young they are at that time,
yeah,
especially
yeah.
with the actress and the way the Jedi used them as warriors, as soldiers, and how
Child soldiers.
child soldiers, like how messed up is. And in the Clone Wars, it's a cartoon, so it's hard to get a real sense of like what their age is or the gravity of that situation. But seeing it in live action like this with real actors, and it you really get a sense of how really messed up that way of thinking is, and sending
Yeah.
these two children essentially into a battle to kill hundreds, if not
Yeah.
thousands, of whatever. What are they even fighting at the
Well,
time? The
they're fighting
droids, or
droids, so they're not necessarily killing like sentient beings. Although there's something to be said about the sentience of droids in the Star Wars universe.
right?
Uh, so like I guess in that sense, it's like not as traumatizing because
Yeah,
they're
but
not
then
actually
she's
a killer.
seeing all these
Yeah,
clones die
she
around
is
her,
seeing, and
right?
she made friends with all of the clones. She wasn't like most of the other Jedi, where essentially the clones were on the same level as these other droids. I didn't really care about them too much.
Right,
Um, but she made friends with them. She gave them names. She respected them. She told stories with them, and back and forth. Like she bonded with the clones on an individual level, right?
well, we'll see one soon. Let's not get to
Yeah,
him yet, but
yeah,
one of the best clones in the
yeah.
series, right?
So like this is all still very traumatizing to her, but I think like the point is, although she should still feel, she shouldn't allow it to affect her as powerfully as it is right now. Like she should
Yeah,
be more mature than this. She should be smarter than this, and she should be able to understand the situation better than she is. So I think that's kind of other than like the overall lesson of you have to fight to stay alive, or this your path is over with, but also like you need to grow up
yeah,
because like war is ugly and war is terrible, but you are an adult now, and war is a very real part of the galaxy. If
yeah,
you can't handle this, there's a problem, and you should be able to handle this by now.
yeah,
She went through years of the Clone Wars, years of it.
yeah. And
And
it seems like she really still hasn't, even as an adult. Maybe that's the overall point, right? That she hasn't really grappled with that.
yeah, and there's some other points that I'm gonna make once we get further into these visions
Yeah,
that I think are sort of adding to her hesitation to fully buy into being like a soldier and a warrior, and
yeah.
how like what's making her hesitate just going full send. But we'll get to that. So
All right, well, back on Cetos, there's still no luck finding Ahsoka or Sabine. Hugh Yang is with Hera in her ship, says that I was surprised that they approved your mission, and she basically just says, well, they didn't, and she came anyway.
yeah,
They have a discussion about where they could be. Hera says Ahsoka's tenacious, and Hugh Yang says so was her master. And Hera asks, what was he like? And Hugh Yang says intense. And before we
very
move on, because
foreboding kind of mood too. He wasn't
well,
just
right,
like flippantly, oh, he's kind of intense. He's like, yeah, no,
well, because Hugh Yang obviously knows who Anakin is
yep.
and what he became and all that.
Hmm.
How on earth does Hera not know who Anakin was or what he became? Because she's
Most
very clearly like asking like, okay, like who was he? Or like what? What? And before He-Man can really get into it, or Hera can ask any more questions, they're interrupted. But well, that didn't make sense to me. Am I missing something? Like Hera had to have known who Anakin. I mean, she's a general in the New Republic like army. She was one of the leading commanders in the rebellion. Like, how does she not know who Anakin or Darth Vader was, or does she just not know the connection between Anakin becoming Darth Vader?
Most people don't know. So the official story, even people that worked for Vader, know him as Darth Vader and do not know that he was Anakin. Um,
Interesting.
Moff Tarkin's one of the few people that knew. Obviously, like Obi-Wan and Yoda and Luke knew, but the vast majority of people truly believed that Obi-Wan killed Anakin on Mustafar.
Really? Okay. Yeah,
So,
that
so,
makes sense.
and obviously, most people aren't talking about this because the people that do know are either Empire loyalists slash sympathizers, and they're not gonna, give away Empire secrets, or they're on the good side, the light side, and are just so traumatized by this event that they don't talk about it. Even Hu Yang, who is a droid and shouldn't necessarily have emotion, is kind of like, yep, he was real intense, and he left it at that. He didn't
Yeah.
he didn't indulge anymore because it even affects him. You know, no one wants to talk about it because Anakin was like the best of the best, and
Yeah.
he fell harder than
When it's like even
almost
he
anyone
fell,
else.
right? That's the
Yeah.
point. Like, you
Yep.
are the best of the best, and even you
Yep.
succumb to the dark side.
So
It's
so yeah, a lot of people just don't know who Vader really is. They just think he was one of the Emperor's apprentices and just like another Sith Lord that rose to power within the Empire. Like Thrawn knows who Vader
yeah.
is,
Maybe we find that
and
out later, but
and so Vader keeps the fact that he's Anakin a secret from everyone as well because he also doesn't really want to face that. And if you read any of the Thrawn books, there's like an entire book where him and Vader are kind of working together, and Thrawn figures it out basically at their first interaction, who Vader really is, and never directly says it, but throughout the entire book keeps jabbing Vader about stories about Anakin and insinuating, that he knows without actually saying anything.
the more you talk about these books, and I've actually listened to a couple other podcasts who there's some people who've read the books, but they seem very interested. I never read them, but I might give them a go. I might get some and read some. I've heard they're really good things.
Yeah, so I read the first trilogy. I know there's another one that essentially takes place after Thrawn comes back, and I don't know if Disney's staying
Okay.
true to that or not. Um, but the first trilogy was really good. It's basically about uh, Thrawn making a deal with the Emperor to save his people from an invasion of an alien species called the Chiss. And you
Interesting.
you what's really interesting is you realize that Thrawn is not necessarily a bad guy, and this is kind of we'll get into it when we see him in the series more. But Thrawn's not a bad guy. He is very tactical and very smart. Uh, like superhuman level of intelligence. But he's also very what's the word that I'm looking for? Um, I don't know what I'm looking like. He's just very strategic, right? And
Yeah.
so during this Chiss invasion, his people aren't strong enough to fight the Chiss off on their own. So he knows that the Empire has the resources. So he goes to Palpatine, who he has worked with before, um, in various capacities, and he's like, "Hey, look, I will lead your armies. I will win battles for you. I'll do all of this stuff for you, but I need you to save my people." And the Emperor basically is like, "Deal. Uh, all I got to do is wipe out some alien species, which the Empire is very xenophobic anyways." So he's like, we just wipe out some alien species, and this guy's gonna like literally lead us to victory. And without Ezra's intervention, would have. So, and Thrawn rises through the ranks, becomes like a super powerful general. You see him in Rebels doing all sorts of stuff, and he
Yeah.
makes a lot of really smart moves in Rebels too. You know,
Does
he's
he? Okay.
just yeah. So you know, but he's not doing this because he hates the rebels necessarily. He's doing it because he needs to save his people, and this is his best chance at doing that. I fully believe that if the tables were turned and it was the Republic that was fighting, you know, the Empire or the Separatists, and the Republic had the upper hand, and he truly believed that the Republic was power enough to help him, he would have joined the Republic. He would have just been like, "Hey guys, like, if you help me save my people, I will win battles for you." That's all he's doing. He's just, earning a favor, really.
Because he definitely comes off as Space Hitler in this series.
And, I mean, he is very stoic, and like, he doesn't have any emotion, so I can get that vibe from him. Even when you want to look at him from a neutral perspective, where you don't think he's evil, uh, I mean, he's very much like, I don't know. I guess you can't really call him Space Hitler, because Space Hitler would have is more like Palpatine. Like,
Palpatine.
yeah, kill everything. Aliens are bad, okay. And but Thrawn is an alien. He's got blue skin and red eyes. In
Yeah.
the books, when he's like rising through the ranks and stuff, he constantly has to have help from humans, because like he runs into a lot of barriers due to the fact that he's an alien. Like, aliens do exist and live as free citizens within the Empire, but um, think of it like uh, separate but equal. Back in our American history, that's kind of how the aliens were treated.
Hmm.
So, uh, and separate but equal did not work, because we treated those people like garbage, even though we were trying to say we were equal. So that's
Yeah.
how it was. Like, everyone acted like on the face, in public was like, oh yeah, aliens are fine. But when it came to actually how they treated them and supported them within the Empire, they were treated very, very poorly.
I
And so
gotcha.
was Thrawn. Yeah.
All right. Well, they were then interrupted. I mean, Hera and Yu Yang, interrupted by Jason and Chopper, who may have found something. Jason tells her that they need to get very low, and they give them coordinates,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really that scene. Back to Ahsoka, we jump right into another battle where it's just Ahsoka and the clone troopers. They're obviously killing Mandalorians. We see Rex, which is, if anybody who's seen Rebels, I think he's even in Clone Wars.
Yep.
That's her buddy, right? He's the one. If you've seen Rebels, she takes out that inhibitor chip, so he's not affected by Order 66. He sticks by her side for a very long time. To be honest with you, I assume he's dead at this point. I don't remember what happens to Rex.
Um, I don't know if he's necessarily dead at this point, but he is old.
I
So
would assume
Rex
so.
was one of the clone captains
Right.
that was basically always with Anakin and Ahsoka.
Yep.
They were part of the 501st company that Anakin ran, and or the 501st Legion, I think it was called. And so you actually, now this is a retcon canon, but if you remember in um, episode 6, when uh, they're storming that Ewok planet, and you see that old bearded dude on the side of the building, like getting ready to set off the charges so they can go in there. And then there's that whole Han Solo scene where he's like, "Oh, uh, where he like not that he like runs in and there's a bunch of dudes in there, and he like has to figure out how to take care of that so they can turn off the shields to the new Death Star." That old
Right.
dude with the beard, that's Rex. That's Captain Rex.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
So it's one of those things I was like, retconned. and that's why that. So like when you see old Rex and they give him that white beard and everything, that's why they wanted him to look like that guy, so they could say, "Oh yeah,
Okay.
he's been a part of it the whole time." Just so you guys know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I
That's
don't
kind of
think.
cool.
Yeah,
I
I
would
don't
I would
think
have to go
he's.
back and watch that. I don't remember
Yeah.
that. I'd have to see that again. That's interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, he wasn't Captain Rex when they filmed the original trilogy, but he was
Yeah.
Captain Rex after Clone Wars.
Okay.
That's just a cool little tidbit of info.
That's cool.
But yeah, so Rex has been with Ahsoka forever, and
Yeah.
like you said, like she
And
got
super
his info
loyal
there
to
too.
her.
Yeah, yep. A lot of the people in the 501st had trouble with Order 66, and then once the majority of the 501st started following Vader, they stopped having problems. I don't know if
Yeah.
they necessarily knew that they probably didn't necessarily know that Luke and Vader were the same person, but it was much more familiar to them, and that's why like a lot of
Yeah.
other clones had problems. Is like from a knee jerk reaction, yeah, they just started shooting at these Jedi. But as word got spread that it had to do with like inhibitor chips and them being controlled and stuff, like a lot of the clones started like getting all squirrely, you know. And that's why we don't have clones anymore when the Empire's ruling and they moved over to stormtroopers
Right.
because the clones were essentially a obsolete and getting old, and b not necessarily doing exactly what they were supposed to do because the Jedi taught them to think for themselves.
Yeah. But then you saying that kind of reminded me of that. I think it's one of the last episodes. It might even be the episode where Order 66 is finally called, and it's when it's Ahsoka. She's already left the Jedi Order. She comes back. I think they're on some kind of ship. I can't remember exactly, but I
Yep,
know
yep.
she's with Anakin, and he takes her into this like bay of that. It might have been the 501st, the kind of troop you're talking about, and
Mm-hmm.
Rex takes them into all the soldiers, and they have all painted their helmets like
Like
kind of
Ahsoka.
Ahsoka's,
Yep.
just kind of as a really like a form of like respect to her,
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah,
very
I believe
loyal
that
to
was the
her.
501st Legion. That was the last
Okay,
time that she was able to command them.
yeah, that was I'm not super hip, as you know, on the animated one, but that was a really good. That was a really good episode.
Yeah. And when you see Luke storming the Jedi Citadel, and there's like that bunch of dudes behind him, that's also the 501st Legion. He basically like
You mean Anakin?
yeah, that's what I meant to say is Anakin.
Yeah,
I'm sure I actually that is what I really said. Don't rewind this.
it is. Yeah, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure you're right. That's my. Yeah, you go ahead.
But yeah, so that was once again that's Darth Vader, aka Anakin, with his 501st Legion. There's a lot of Vader comics out there, and he's just always got those dudes with him. So like
Right.
that's like the one thing that never changed. He like he just trusted them, and they trusted him.
All right, Anakin is walking up behind Ahsoka, kind of looking around confused. He doesn't know this battle because he wasn't there with Ahsoka, and Ahsoka
Yep.
tells him that it's the Siege of Mandalore, which is a lot of lore around that.
Mm-hmm.
They had parted ways at this point. Anakin says, "You did well. You're a warrior now, as I trained you to be." He tells her that she is part of a legacy, and Ahsoka says that her part is one of death and war. And she tells Anakin that he is more powerful and dangerous than anyone realized. And Anakin kind of takes offense to that. And you kind of see, is that what this is all about?
Yeah.
He said, "You have learned nothing, back to the beginning." And kind of, storms off a little bit.
Yeah.
With his.
Quick. I want to do a
Yeah,
quick
go ahead.
slight rewind. So when you get here, you
Yeah,
see
yeah.
you're slicing down like these Mandalorians. These are, if you look, some of them have horns on their helmet.
Yeah.
So these aren't just regular Mandalorians. These are the what do they call them? The Death Troopers. These are the Mandalorians
Uh,
that follow um, Darth Maul when he got the dark
okay.
saber and took over a bunch of people. So I don't think she's here to conquer Mandalore. I think she's here protecting Mandalore or attempting to protect Mandalore from uh, those guys. I don't know everything about that battle. I don't think Disney's really gone into too much detail of it. But yeah, so she's fighting uh, Maul's people.
The Siege of Mandalore is something that's referenced kind of
Uh,
throughout a lot of the Star Wars material. They really should do something to expand upon that. Whether it's
I'm
if
sure there's
they
a book somewhere.
did, well, I'm sure there's a book, but so one of the spin-off movies that's my favorite is Rogue One. If they did a Siege of Mandalore film or short series in the same vein of how they did Rogue One, I think that would be fantastic.
It would.
They really should consider doing that. So Disney, listen up.
But yeah, now we're back, and Anakin's like, oh, you've learned nothing. Back to the beginning. Um, I think that this is like finally where, well, first you have like what I was saying earlier, where the reason that she's still taking all of this so hard and hasn't grown beyond this is because she does know that she's got a lot of Anakin inside of her, and like because she learned from him, like his teachings are basically all she knows. She is scared of turning into something similar.
Well,
That
you
is
almost
why
see
she's
her kind of come to.
yeah.
Like, she's just going through the motions. Like, she is that Ahsoka at that time. She's
Yeah.
not. It to me, it kind of comes off as like she has almost maybe not forgotten, but like this entire battle has taken place as her
Yeah.
younger self, and Anakin hasn't been there, and she's just been mowing down,
Hmm.
these Mandalorian troopers or whatever,
Yeah.
and so she kind of realizes what she's doing, and realizes the weight of what Anakin just told her, that you are the warrior that I trained you to be, and that's not who she wanted to be.
Whew.
All righty, hopefully this will clip seamlessly back into the video, but we are having some technical difficulties, but we'll pick up right where we left off. With Anakin's back turned to Ahsoka, he says, I gave you a choice, live or die, and turns around with his now red lightsaber drawn, and you can also see in his eyes he has like those Sith eyes. Whether I don't know if is it orange or red, whatever it is.
It's like both. It's like a mix of orange and red in there.
Right, and Ahsoka says no, and he just looks at her and says incorrect.
Yeah.
And so they start fighting. Anakin overpowers her and kicks her back, falling back into the world between worlds. You hear that iconic Darth Vader breathing,
Hmm.
the sound.
I also like if you listen to his voice in these next couple words that he says,
Yeah.
they make it sound almost as if he's talking through his master
Yeah. It's
still.
like a little distorted, right?
Yeah.
You hear Anakin, or I'm sorry, you see Anakin rather, walking towards Ahsoka out of the smoke, the fog, and he kind of does that shrug, right?
Hmm.
And it almost reminded me of like the Joker, like Heath Ledger's Joker in a way, like that he got that like little tick, you know.
Hmm.
I don't know why that came to my mind, but that's what kind of reminded me of when I saw it. But he's walking out of that fog, that haze. He kind of shrugs, and in a lightning flash, you see him change to Vader again. I believe it happens twice. I think there's two flashes. He changes back and forth to Vader from Anakin, and he changes back to Anakin, and he tells her that you lack conviction, and they continue to battle.
Yeah.
Ahsoka now is back to her current adult self in this scene. They, they're fighting, right? They lock sabers at one point, and Anakin overpowers her and says, "Time to die." Knocks both of her lightsabers out of her hands. She dodges them, maneuvers around him, and somehow takes his saber, is holding it to his throat. And for a second, she starts to let her emotions overpower her. And for a split second, she kind of leans in real close. You can see her face tensing up, getting real angry, and her eyes change to the Sith eyes. You
Yeah.
can see her eyes change to that red, orange, whatever it is. And she then relaxes, throws his lightsaber over the bridge or whatever the hell they're standing on.
Mm-hmm.
Ahsoka says, "I choose to live." You see Anakin's demeanor change as he kind of steps back. He relaxes. His eyes change back to his normal self, um, and says, "There's hope for you yet." You hear this lightning crash in the distance, and Anakin is gone. She turns around to see what that was. She turns back around. Anakin has disappeared. Everything around Ahsoka just starts to change. Water's rising around her, up to her head, and you see her submerged. And she opens her eyes as you can see what looks like someone trying to rescue her. Right, she's being brought up to this ship. Hera's crew brings her onto the like the platform where they can bring her up onto
Yeah.
the whatever you want to call that, the platform of the ship, and she says Anakin's name twice and passes out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that scene.
Yeah. Let's jump into this scene a little bit more because there's a lot of nuances going on in here.
Yeah.
Um, so one thing that a lot of not a lot, actually, a very select few Jedi go through as a sort of like form of training is they have to confront like their dark self and they have to accept and move on from it. That is basically in Clone Wars. You see Yoda go through this trial, and if Yoda has to still go through this trial, you know how advanced of a, I guess, training technique this is, right?
Right.
I guess like the key is in order to, or I think the point is that in order to have a stronger bond with the Force, you have to, accept all of who you are,
It
and
was about
everyone's got
balance, right?
yeah, and everyone's got a little bit of the dark side in them. You watch Yoda in the Clone Wars face off against a Darth Yoda, like a dark evil version of himself.
Oh, really?
Um,
Okay.
hmm And so I think that's kind of what part of what this training was about. Obviously, it was also about her like fighting for survival, but he is bringing her through the training that she needs to go through in order to create a stronger bond with the Force. So that's kind of what this was. That's why this whole thing, he's been pushing her in true Anakin fashion. This is how he's trained her since the beginning. Put her in a situation that would be very easy for her to fail in, but with the full confidence that she'll come out on top. Um, and so like that's what this was, and that's why like you keep seeing Anakin flash between like himself, the dark version of himself, and Vader, right? Because as Anakin exists now, he like those are all parts of him.
Yeah.
Just because like he turned away from the dark and saved his son, that doesn't mean that like he's not Vader anymore. He is still Vader, but he's also Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's kind of what like you see like for a split second you see the dark side kind of take over Ahsoka, but she denies it. She takes a step back. She realizes that she doesn't need to push this far, which is something she's been scared of this whole time was going too far. She stepped away from the proverbial ledge, and you see like when Anakin takes a step back and he looks down and he looks back up at her, and his face is normal again, and he sort of smirks at her, because she passed the test, like he knew
Right.
she always would, but
Right.
he had to give her that test anyways. So it's really cool. But yeah, that's really what I wanted to talk about is that little interaction meant a lot. It also means I believe that the next time if Ahsoka were to fall again, like she's got a strong enough connection to the Force that when she dies, she'll be able to maintain consciousness and actually transfer into a Force ghost rather than just becoming one with the Force and ceasing to exist.
Yeah. Yeah, you would hope so, right? So Ahsoka now waking up aboard her ship. Hugh Yang, says welcome back. He tells her it was Jason, who basically it's Jason's fault. He's the one who rescued her, right? It was
Yeah.
his ability to hear the battle, pinpoint kind of where she was, and he rescued her. She finds out that Hera brought a squadron of X-wings with her, but also that they still have not been able to find Sabine.
Yeah.
Ahsoka joins everyone outside of the ship. Jason gives her a big hug, tells her that he heard her fighting, and you can see Ahsoka is like really interested by that. She kind of has that like, really okay. Jason, he gives her a hug, asks. Well, before he asks Hugh Yang about the training, Hera tells Jason to go with Hugh Yang to the ship. They need some time to, adult time, right? talk about what happened, right? So Jason going with Hugh Yang to the ship, asked to check out the training room. Asked Hugh Yang to train him. He says no. Jason asks if he can build a lightsaber because he finds out Hugh Yang. Yeah, no. It's kind of funny exchange between those two. Hera and Ahsoka try to figure out what happened to Sabine. Ahsoka then takes, I think she has the broken map, right? And she then uses that ability. We talked about this, and I want to say it was episode 2, where she has that ability to almost see those like Force echoes. I think is how they call them in the game. Whatever it is, there's memories attached to certain materials, things like that she can sense. So she takes that, kind of does her thing, senses the echo, and she learns what we already know, is that Sabine pretty much went willingly with Balon after he convinced her. You can see the disappointment on Ahsoka's face.
Yeah.
She then tells Hera that, she knows kind of where Sabine went. She doesn't tell her the whole truth, though, right? I mean, she leaves out the whole part. Well, basically, Sabine betrayed us and everyone. She betrayed what Ezra did in the first place. Has now, the sacrifice that Ezra made to even get thrown out of this whole galaxy, right, with the Purgle and all that. We'll get into that later. But she's basically betrayed that memory of him, betrayed the entire Republic, given the map to these guys twice, leaves all that out of it, right? Hera then learns that the fleet is on their way to them, and not a positive return of the fleet. Hera leaves to deal with the fleet while Ahsoka figures out a way to Sabine, or tries to figure out a way to Sabine. She hears and then sees the Purgle flying above them, right? And kind of put together, she's going to try to devise some kind of plan to use these Purgle to go and find Sabine. Hera is in her ship speaking to, I believe it's Mon Mothma. Is that how you say her name? The Chancellor?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not really
I think
sure.
that's how you say her name. About how they basically have no evidence, no one in custody. Their trip is kind of pointless. Not pointless, but in their eyes, it's going to be pointless because they have nothing to really show for it. Everyone's gone, right? They cannot prove what they were there to investigate in the first place. The Chancellor tells Hera that her and Ahsoka are to return to Coruscant with the fleet. She tells Hera that the Council is going to try and basically strip her of her command. Ahsoka comes in after their discussion, right at the tail end of that. Basically, Mount Mothma, she's telling her that you need to bring Ahsoka in to basically back up your story so they do not strip your command, right?
Yeah.
Ahsoka comes in and says that she knows how to get to Sabine. They all then devise this plan. They set off towards the Purgle. Ahsoka goes out on the wing of her ship, seemingly to communicate with these space whale
Mm-hmm.
squids.
Yep.
The Purrgil. Ahsoka goes out on the wing of her ship. Hera tells her squadron to stall the fleet so that they don't frighten the pod of these Purrgil.
Yeah.
You have anything to add? You want me to keep going with this?
Yeah. We kind of went a little quick here.
Yeah.
Back that little exchange between Ahsoka and the kid. What's his name again?
Jason, I think.
Jason. There you go. Yeah. Uh, and like this is why earlier I said I think that uh, Jason's mom knows that he's force sensitive, but is keeping it kind of hush hush. Because once Ahsoka sees or understands that, he's the one that could hear her and essentially found her, she's like, "Ooh, like you definitely like you said." She makes that look, um, and she even shares like a short visual exchange with Hera, and Hera doesn't look super pleased at the look
Well,
that
I think
Ahsoka's
so.
getting.
She knows that he's force sensitive, right? But I don't think they understand how force sensitive he is because Hugh Yang knows that he's force sensitive. He's the one who explains to that captain of their squadron,
Yeah,
what's happening, who her father is, whatever. So I definitely think Ahsoka knows that he's force sensitive, but not to the extent where like he can hear her in the world between worlds. Like,
yeah,
can I don't know of any other Jedi that could do that. Maybe
yeah,
Ezra, I
yeah. I
guess.
don't know. That's one of those weird nuancy things where there's a lot of things that could explain him potentially being able to do it.
Yeah.
Like we said earlier, it could just be like the amount of emotion that he's had invested in this situation. You know how bad he wants to find Ahsoka, but also, yeah, it's pretty unheard of for somebody to be able to just listen in to the world between worlds. So that is kind of significant.
Well,
Um,
honestly, what I'm sorry to cut you off. I keep doing that,
no,
but
you're good.
just so I don't lose this thought because my head's a jumbled mess most of the time. Uh, I I don't know if this is where they're going to go with this, but we keep coming back to that idea of a master, Padawan, or apprentice, whatever, having that
Yeah.
connection. Would it be possible? And I don't know if this is where they're going again, but that instead of having that ability to just hear into the world between worlds, where maybe he has some kind of connection with Ahsoka, and they'll eventually go to this master Padawan relationship between those two.
I don't think so because Ahsoka is still pretty dead set on training Sabine.
At
I
this point, right?
Yeah, I think what's more likely to happen is that Jason is going to join Luke's new Jedi school.
Yeah, I could see that
Because
happening.
he's a little old to join by traditional Jedi standards, but as we know, like Luke's making his own rules at this point. He's using the old Jedi way as kind of uh, what to do and what not to do. He's doing some of the same things the same and changing others the way that he sees fit. So I think he's just going to be student, probably a very successful one, seeing as how
well,
he's
this
able
just
to listen between dimensions.
this just
So,
popped in my head. Okay, so he goes to this school, right?
yeah,
And I don't know where Kylo Ren is at this point, but Jason, what if Jason becomes one of the Knights of Ren?
that would be a twist.
Yeah.
He. I think he can, like, timeline wise, he is technically old enough to fall into that category. But I also think that Disney is using all of these series to sort of retcon.
Yeah, I think
So
so
I don't
too.
know if they're going to do it the same way. There's probably still going to be a Kylo Ren. There's still probably going to be a Knights of Ren, but I think they're going to change the way that story actually unfolds because Kylo Ren's
But
cool, and
he's a
the
very
Knights of
cool character, yeah.
and the Knights of Ren are cool. I don't necessarily like the way they portrayed Kylo Ren because they made him a little bit whiny, which I didn't
That's
appreciate.
very true. He's very
But
like an emotional 14-year-old
yeah,
as
but
far as his mentality is.
as far as someone who is aspiring to be the next Vader, um, and someone who is aspiring to become a powerful Sith Lord, and that I thought his lightsaber was super cool,
Yeah.
with the cross guard beams and stuff. He was set up to be really cool.
Well, I think they're also setting Jason up to be another main protagonist, if not be another main character that they'll eventually focus around as being another Jedi.
Yeah, he could be like the next. I mean, I guess Ray already is, but he could be like the next, Luke or Anakin.
Yeah.
He's really powerful, or at least like sidekick to Ray. Maybe they'll meet somewhere down the road.
Yeah.
Although I'm fairly certain that they mention in the sequel trilogy that Kylo Ren did kill everyone in Luke's school. So I don't.
Did he?
We'll see. I think so. It's been a while
I
since I've
know he
seen those
like
movies.
destroyed it. Yeah, I can't remember exactly if he killed them. Did the whole Anakin to the
Yeah,
little
I think he
Jedi's,
did,
but
but I'm not sure. At this point, like Anakin, other than kind of not really Grogu, or not Anakin, Luke doesn't really have any students yet. Anyways, he's still trying to figure out how he wants to build
right.
this academy. So it would make sense if he went and trained under Luke. If he trained under Ahsoka, that would probably be fine too. But I really think Ahsoka wants to focus on her current, right
But and
now.
we'll get to this later because I wouldn't call it an issue yet because it kind of depends on the direction they go with this series. But I know Ahsoka's pretty dead set on training Sabine, but Sabine has got to have some repercussions for what she's done, right? I mean, she is the definition of a traitor. I mean, she is probably the most treasonous person I've seen in this series, at late, if not the recent Star Wars universe. I mean, she willingly gave the map to Balon to go for her own selfish needs to find Ezra.
Hmm.
Um, this is bringing back one of the main, and she knows that she's bringing back Thrawn. I mean, that's the point of their mission. She knows this. Fully going into this, Ezra sacrificed himself in the beginning, during what the hell was that? Rebels,
Yeah.
to to keep him from these, but you save everyone, and she's just giving him access right to him to come back because she misses her brother, boyfriend, whatever this is.
Yeah. Well, you make a very good point. But she's also doing the wrong things for the right reasons. She's also not trained to be a Jedi and handle her emotions the way the Jedi is supposed to. Kind
But
of
she's a
going back,
very accomplished soldier. She's a
which she's
Mandalorian.
yeah, and Mandalorians are very notorious for doing whatever the heck they want to do, regardless
Okay.
of consequences. Right.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that she's got to overcome. And back to the lesson that Ahsoka just learned when she got like a good chunk of her company killed because she made a bad call. Sabine, you can call it uh, treason if you want, but really Sabine made a bad call. She thought that she could leave the map behind so people could follow her. She did leave her helmet behind, which I think she did on purpose. Um, she's trying to save someone she really really cares about, which uh, you know from our perspective is the wrong move, but like when you look at it through her eyes, it's the only way to save Ezra. And as much as she doesn't want to bring Thrawn back, saving Ezra is more important to her. And she's affiliated with the New Republic, but she doesn't necessarily align herself with the New Republic. Um, because she's a Mandalorian. She might be living uh, over there in that what's the planet called again, so we don't butcher it.
Cetos? Oh, no, Lothal.
Lothal, yeah. She might be living on Lothal, and she might sometimes make appearances because she's a war hero, but she's not necessarily
No, the only reason she's there is because of Ezra, right?
Yeah, she's not really buying into uh, the New Republic, you know? And so, yeah, her alliances may be kind of skewed. Her ability to understand what's important and not important might not be very good, but she's just doing the best that she knows how to. So,
Yeah.
and once again, like the Jedi are all about redemption and making up for the mistakes that you've already made.
Right.
So yeah, if someone were to catch wind of the actual choices that she made, she might have to face some sort of repercussion for that. Um, but I don't think that's going to come from Ahsoka. I think Ahsoka is just going to try and teach her how to make better choices in the future, and to be a more centered warrior.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that won't be the last time we get into that because I know
Yeah.
what's to come, especially whatever happens at the last episode. We'll have to rehash some of this. So,
Mm-hmm.
all right, back to Captain Teva is attempting to stall he's attempting to stall the captain of the New Republic fleet that's there. Um, threatens him. She threatens him, and he basically immediately relents and says, "Okay, but you're not gonna believe this, right?" So, not really a tough nut to crack, that guy.
No. Mm-mm.
So back to Hera and Jason. They're watching Ahsoka discussing how Ezra used the Purrgil to defeat Thrawn. And she's kind of rehashing to Jason, the history of that, right? You find out what Ahsoka's trying to do. She's trying to use the Purrgil to take her to where Ezra is, which we kind of already assumed, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Purrgil, she's up there, communicating with this thing. Yeah, the Purrgil opens her mouth, its mouth, her, him. I don't know. I don't think really know either, both, whatever. The Purrgil opens its mouth, and kind of like Miss Frizzle in the Magic School Bus, they go inside and land on this thing's tongue. I guess I don't
Yeah.
know, inside the whale. Um, Hugh Yang says that you're certain you know where Sabine. Oh, you're certain they know where Sabine has been taken. Something along
Mm-hmm.
those lines, right? And Ahsoka says, no idea. We'll just see where it goes, right?
Yeah. She's
Um,
allowing the Force to guide her.
right. Well, and the Purrgil, I suppose.
Yeah. Well.
So Hugh Yang said it could go anywhere, and Ahsoka says, I know, but it's better than going nowhere. Which, fair point, right?
Yeah.
Anything you want to add about the Purrgil or anything like that?
I So the last couple episodes, I kept saying there's something I wanted to say about the Purrgil, and I rewatched this last episode, and so I remember the first time I saw this episode, seeing a scar on the Purrgil that they end up going inside of. I also remember in Rebels there being a scar on one of the Purrgil that Ezra sort of saves and bonds with. I've looked back and I don't see any of that stuff now. And I've done a couple of Google searches and haven't found anything conclusive. I still feel like, because it would make sense that the Purrgil that they're actually using is the one Purrgil that Ezra sort of like bonded with and called
Right.
out to help, get thrown away
It's
and
very
all that
possible,
stuff.
right?
Yeah, it would just make sense storytelling wise. I think it would be more impactful. So I guess my head canon is that is Ezra's Purrgil.
Yeah.
And
Well, they use this like hyper galactic lanes or whatever for
yeah,
like their migration path. So it would
yeah,
make sense that if these Purrgil are the ones that are using these lanes, that it would be the same
hmm
that Ezra bonded with, right?
yeah. But I think that's pretty much it for this episode. Yeah.
Almost. We cut back to the fleet where Carson is finishing telling the captain
Oh,
basically exactly what they're doing, right?
yeah,
They're leaving nothing out.
yeah.
And Hera then interrupts them, tells her to move her fleet. She
Oh,
looks
this was
up.
kind of funny to me.
Yeah, well, she looks up and apparently just now notices like 100 Purgle heading directly at their entire fleet. But whatever. They're all headed right towards them. The Purgle maneuver around the fleet, and one by one, they jump to hyperspace and
Yeah.
out of here.
So
And
so
that's
what?
where the episode ends.
Yeah. What was really funny about this scene to me is she sees the Purgle and she's like fleet take evasive maneuvers, and their evasive maneuver was to fly straight at the Purgle.
Yeah, well, and the one just kind of goes like this
Yeah.
a little bit. Like
Yeah.
evasive maneuvers.
Yeah.
You did nothing. You did absolutely nothing.
Which is, this is kind of a trope in Star Wars, right? Where
Yeah.
they're like trying to do some, even back in the prequel trilogy, where Anakin gets into that starfighter for the first time, and like everyone's shooting at him, like, oh, I'll do a barrel roll. That's a neat trick, and he starts doing a barrel roll. It's like you're still in the exact same
The
spot.
exact same spot.
You're just twirling around on yourself. Like,
Yep.
if they still shoot at you, they're gonna hit you. You didn't
Yeah.
aid anything. And then same thing in the Millennium Falcon when all of those TIE fighters are shooting, and
Yeah.
and Han Solo's like, oh, I gotta make evasive maneuvers or whatever, and he just sort of like moves a little bit this way, not even very fast. And so you didn't really like evade anything. You
Yeah.
just kind of moved to the left a little bit.
Yeah.
Even Family Guy has an episode where they're kind of
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, that was so yeah. This was I don't know if this is my favorite episode, but like it is for you. But this was a good one. Like we said before, this is where like the series takes the turn
Yeah.
and starts ramping it up.
But honestly, this is just my favorite episode, just because I've always been really attracted to the stories of the struggle between that, and and this go not just for Star Wars, this is for a lot of different other different series, but that struggle between the light and the dark, the good
Yeah.
versus bad. With that, I've always liked that kind of storytelling. I think they did a really good job of it here, especially going back to the Clone Wars. I don't think anybody really expected to see a sequence of a live action Clone Wars. I think that's coming from, what was that, Dave Filoni, that he did that too, and he's directing this or whatever he's doing. I mean, that's his baby, right? So of course he would put that in there, but I don't think anybody expected that. I think as far as visual effects go, I thought it was great. I didn't have any issues with it. Besides some little minor things, I think this is probably the most well-rounded episode, at least for me.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought it was great. Really pleased with it. There was a couple things that I think we've already hashed out. Why I didn't really understand like the world between worlds, but you kind of explained that, made me feel better about that. About Hera being force sensitive, I still have a gripe with that, but that's just an overall Disney-fied version of Star Wars that I have issues with. My only question for you is, what do you think the overall takeaway, the overall lesson that Anakin was trying to teach Ahsoka, without hashing everything out? I mean, I know we went through some of this already,
Yeah.
but what did she take away from that? How was she able to complete her training with Anakin?
I think she learned to accept things. She learned to accept who Anakin was completely, and in his entirety, and she learned to accept those very same thoughts and emotions within herself. I think it helped her gain balance,
Right.
so I think that's what I think it was really about. Obviously, there's a lot of other nuances and symbology that got thrown into there as well. But I think the big main thing was Ahsoka needed to find balance, and Anakin helped her do that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's pretty much the same exact thing I took from it too. She's definitely, I think she can treat Sabine better as a master Padawan relationship now going
and
through
she
that.
does in these next couple episodes.
Right, yeah, you kind of see that.
The old Ahsoka would have landed on planet and given Sabine hell, and
Oh
that
yeah,
is
ripped
not
her
at
a new
all.
one, right?
That is not at all what happened. She deals with the situation in a very positive way,
Yeah,
which obviously we're going to get into. So we're not going to get
right.
into it here or now.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think the only thing we need is more of Captain Rex. I think we need a a Clone Wars series live action with these guys. We need a Captain Rex.
Just
Uh,
have it be old Captain Rex, right? He's not off fighting wars or anything. He's just being a
yeah,
crotchety old man,
I want the
and like
bald white beard.
in like a rocking
Yeah,
chair. Maybe he's just like telling some stories to
yep.
like grandkids or something, and he's just an old man, just living out his what do they call it? His twilight years.
Hey everyone, we had to cut off that last bit. Shane's actually having some technical difficulties. His computer keeps crashing on him. So I said I would just do the little outro. We were basically finished up with this episode anyway. Great episode. Shane apologizes for not being able to do the outro with me. But we are 3PN. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify. We have more coming down the pike. We just started filming another little series we're going to try and put together for a D&D campaign, I guess is what they call it. I am unfamiliar with it. I've never done it. Shane's a little more familiar with it, and we have another buddy of ours joining us who's done it in the past. We're getting some of our wives to join us as well, so stick around for that. That should be good. And we plan on filming our first actual podcast slash videocast episode with me, Shane, and a buddy of ours named Raider, who will just be going over some basic things in our lives, kind of getting people an idea of who we are, how we met, things like that. We'll just discuss things we're into, our video games, things coming out soon, TV shows we're looking forward to, things like that. So if that sounds interesting, definitely check us out. Again, we are Pixels, Plots, and Parenting, or 3PN. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify. Hit us up on our email for any feedback, comments, things like that. It's pixelsplotsandparenting@gmail.com. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.